Hey guys, welcome into Fantasy Fix, our fantasy football podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Holt. I'm joined by Darren Hartwell. And Darren, we're on to week 11 of the NFL regular season, which means we're winding down here for fantasy football.
Hitting the home stretch.
We are. We're trying to make those playoffs. I know that I need to win out, probably, if I'm going to make the playoffs. I mean, maybe I could have one more loss. But
saying there's a chance.
There is a chance. You're saying there's a chance.
Yep.
There's definitely a chance. We were just talking before this about fantasy football punishments, because if you're in a league, some of these leagues are brutal. If you're in a league with your close friends and you all know each other pretty well, there's a lot riding on yours. No, I've seen people get tattoos on their body. Those YouTube videos where they're reenacting music videos are my favorite. I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah,
I think it was Sia. And my friend Josh is in a league where the loser, whoever loses, has to get on a bus. They have to go 10 hours, wherever that may be, in any direction. Then they have to get right back on the bus and go 10 hours back. And I guess the people are going to know that they're doing this probably via Snapchat videos, but they're going to buy the ticket for them at least. That's the nice part.
Maybe they should wear a little sign, like fantasy football loser or something, like on the bus.
How brutal is that? I mean,
terrible.
Bus rides are already hard enough as it is, but you have to waste 20 hours of your life.
Time is money, or
You're
however
not
you want to call it. Yeah.
No, that's bad.
That's I would rather. I don't know. I think I'd rather do the music video than that.
Oh yeah. Is there anything riding on your leagues here?
So yeah, we're a little bit more tame. I think we right now the plan is that I think whoever loses has to buy pizza for everyone at the draft party next year, which is, it's a win-win. Basically, everyone gets pizza, and you just get to spend a little bit of money on pizza. I'd much rather do that than go 20 hours on a bus ride.
Yeah, sign me up for that league. Well, the problem with our Nesson league is we all love each other. I mean, it's great, it's competitive, but there's no money riding on it, so we're not going to get any bonus at the end of the tunnel if we do happen to win. But hey, we can talk about it here, right?
Make a little off air bets or something like that.
Yeah.
We'll spice it up a little bit.
And the good thing is I can brag this week because I got another big W. The one thing is I had Tyrod Taylor, and he had a terrible day against the Saints. This guy had 56 passing yards, an interception, 27 rushing yards. So not the production that we're used to from Tyrod Taylor. But a couple guys made up for it. Mark Ingram saved the day for me. 3 rushing touchdowns, 131 rushing yards. And A.J. Green had a big day too, 115 receiving yards and a touchdown. So thank you to those guys.
Yeah, we mentioned last week, A.J. Green, don't worry, he's choking people out. It was like, should we start him the next week? He's fine. He's ready to go.
And I also mentioned Kelvin Benjamin. I did start him as well. 3 receptions for 42 yards. So
it's kind of
get him next week.
I mean, if you think about it, though, so Tyrod Taylor had 56 passing yards, and Benjamin had 42 of them, so proportionally a lot. So maybe if he throws for 200 yards, then Benjamin will have 150.
Exactly. Yeah. What about you? How'd you do?
I took the loss in the Nesson League. Did better in some of my other leagues, but yeah, for the Nesson League, not too great.
I'm going good right now.
We're
on the incline. You're on the decline, so yikes.
Yeah. My guy LaShawn McCoy, another rough week for him. Didn't find the end zone. Pretty rough day. And then, so I will give myself a pat on the back for Jared Goff. Got him off the waiver wire. Great day for him. We'll talk about him later. Yep. And then, but the bad news was that my opponent had Robert Woods, and Robert Woods kind of torched me.
Very bad news.
And also Adam Thielen. So both of those guys had over 160 yards, and at least they had 3 touchdowns between them. So
it wasn't really anything that you could do.
No, although I did not really, do
you
that well. You
didn't help matters.
Keep starting Jordy Nelson. I don't know why I keep doing that. I need to cut bait with him. Brett Hundley is not getting him the ball. He's basically a non-factor now. So, yeah, we need to, kind of how you gave your team a little pep talk.
I did. Yes, they were letting me down.
I need to sit my team down, get them on the right track, and going into the playoffs.
Let me know if you need any help from Coach Holt giving the team a pep talk.
Yep.
Okay, storylines, a big dud week in the NFL, in my opinion, in Week 10. Not too many exciting games, a number of blowouts, but with those blowouts, there are teams that are putting up a lot of points, and players in particular that are putting up a lot of fantasy production.
Yeah.
So the Saints, Rams, and the Vikings.
Yep.
The Saints, we already mentioned the big day that Mark Ingram had. He's not the only one from the team, though, that's doing well.
No, Alvin Kamara, that two-headed monster there in the Saints backfield. I think it was a dud, but in terms of fantasy, a lot of surprises. Right. You look at the Saints rushing attack. Who would have thought that would be the dominant force? So Kamara had 106 rushing yards, and also had 5 receptions for 32 yards and a touchdown. So he really racked up the points. So you have Ingram and Kamara, 2 Saints running backs who are both top 10 fantasy plays, which is kind of wild to think about.
It is. It's insane.
They're like consistently on a weekly basis. They're putting up numbers. So the Saints are kind of maybe owners of Drew Brees and Michael Thomas are a little bit disappointed, but their rushing attack is great. They're
fun to watch. And another guy that's fun to watch right now, Jared Goff, as you mentioned, second consecutive game with over 300 plus yards and 3 plus touchdowns.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's kind of you look at this year, last year Jared Goff and Carson Wentz both kind of struggled a little bit. Second year, both of those guys are really hitting their stride. Obviously, Wentz has been a little bit more consistently great throughout the season, but Goff's been really good. He struggled a little bit and he had a few, I think, under 10-point fantasy outputs earlier in the season, but now I think he's pretty. I would call him a QB1. He's putting up consistent numbers, and the Rams love to throw the ball.
Well, of course, if Goff is doing well, that means people on the Rams are doing well. So that's trickled down to a few of his teammates there.
Yeah, we mentioned Robert Woods, much to my chagrin. He's been kind of their big play guy, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks, and obviously Todd Gurley, he's been crushing it. He actually has, sometimes the rushing yards aren't there, but he gets catches passes out of the backfield, 10 plus points in every game except for 1.
Wow, so he's quietly doing well this year.
Very consistent, and that was against the Seahawks. So he's been easily a top 10 fantasy play this season.
Good for him. And the Vikings, also a couple guys that are doing well. I have Stephon Diggs personally, and I've been very happy.
Yeah, he's great, but Adam Thielen has arguably been better. This guy that was on special teams about 2 years ago, kind of coming out of nowhere, and now he's he's top 5 in the NFL in receiving yards. 166 yards and a touchdown, 7 catches. He's kind of Case Keenum's guy right now, so we'll talk about that in a moment. But as long as Case Keenum's under center, Adam Thielen is reaping the benefits.
That's a perfect segue, Darren. Thank you very much. Because what will the Vikings do at quarterback here? Of course, Teddy Bridgewater is back. This is a guy who suffered a horrific knee injury 2 preseasons ago. But he will be the starter at some point. We just don't know when. And then you have Case Keenum, who was thrust into the starting role after Sam Bradford's injury. It's almost a scenario where the Vikings are 7-2, and you think, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, Keenum's had a couple good games in a row. He's averaging 296 yards and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. So what do you think? Is this a scenario where they put Bridgewater back in that starting role, or do they let this play out with Keenum?
Well, I think Bridgewater is their quarterback. He's the guy they drafted in the first round, end of the first round. They want him to be the guy going forward.
As he should be. I mean, he's very talented.
Right. I think, that said, I think for now they should stick with Keenum. And I think there have been some reports that they might try to stick with Keenum at least this week. Like you said, he's the hot hand. Yes, he makes some bad decisions. He had 2 interceptions the other day, but I don't think. You could argue that because they're 7-2, they don't necessarily have to rush Bridgewater back. They can get him on the field at some point, but might as well ride Keenum a little bit, give Bridgewater a little bit more reps at practice, get him a few more, get some more reps under his belt. Maybe if the Vikings are winning by a good margin, or if judging by the game situation, maybe they can put him in for a few snaps, but. I think they're, I can't read Mike Zimmer's mind, but I would say they're leaning a little bit towards Keenum. Big matchup against the Rams, 2 teams we've just talked about in the upcoming week. So I think Keenum's probably a viable starter if he gets the go.
It should be mentioned that Zimmer was non-committal when he was asked who the starter would be in Week 11.
It's all speculation.
I believe tomorrow, Wednesday, he's going to announce who the starter is.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Moving on to a team that's not flourishing as much as some of the other teams that we've mentioned, the Cowboys. Now, of course, this was their first game without Ezekiel Elliott, who is finally serving that suspension that we thought he was going to be serving at various points all throughout the season. They lost to the Falcons on Sunday, 27-7, and their running game is not looking good.
Yeah, so I'll list off the stats here. They're not pretty. Alfred Morris leading the way with 11 carries for 53 yards. Then Rod Smith, 3 carries for 14 yards. And then Darren McFadden, 1 rush for -2 yards. So Darren McFadden had fewer fantasy points than Ezekiel Elliott did in that game. And Ezekiel Elliott did not play. I think the main issue there is, they were also without Tyron Smith, one of their top offensive linemen. He's a tackle. So I think if they get Tyron Smith back in the next game, it'll look a little bit better. And then, in terms of the Alfred Morris, McFadden, Smith debate, it was pretty clear that Morris is their guy. But right now, I don't think any 3 of them are really standing out. I don't think you can really trust. Last year was kind of like, if Elliott went down, anybody can rush behind this offensive line and get a ton of yards. Right. I don't think that's really the case this year. Eagles, they play the Eagles next Sunday. Pretty stingy run defense. It's going to be a big NFC matchup there. So I probably, if I have Morris, or I guess Morris is probably the only guy you would start, I would kind of shy away from him.
Let's move on to some injuries, because once again there were some key names who went down in Week 10. Devontae Freeman being one of the biggest ones. He's expected to miss Week 11. This is his 2nd concussion of the season, so that means that Tevin Coleman, is in a starting role. He's probably owned in your league. I know he's owned in the Nesson League, but if he's not, definitely scoop this guy up. After Freeman went down in the first half, Coleman finished with 83 yards and a touchdown, so something to keep in mind there. Yeah,
he's always been a pretty solid handcuff to Freeman, and he gets stats even when Freeman's in there. That said, pretty tough matchup against the Seahawks coming in Week 11, so temper expectations. But yeah, if he's the number 1 running back there, I think you're definitely starting him.
Aaron Jones out 3 to 6 weeks with a sprained MCL, so that basically means the rest of the fantasy football season. So
yeah, this is a tough one for the Packers. Packers have kind of been in disarray ever since Rodgers went down. Jones was kind of like what we could like to call a waiver wire all-star. He was getting picked up a lot, but he could come back for your fantasy playoffs, but I don't think he's worthy of a roster spot. I think the Packers offense, nobody's really producing right now.
Will Fuller, rib injury, doubtful versus the Cardinals.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to miss that game. Texans, Tom Savage is their quarterback now, so not a great option anyways.
No, and speaking of a quarterback situation where you might not get the best options, Phillip Rivers, he entered the concussion protocol Monday. If he can't play, Kellen Clemens will take over at QB for the Chargers.
It's a name we haven't heard in a while.
Exactly, I don't even know how to pronounce it correctly. Chargers play the Bills on Sunday, so this all means that if you can pick up the Bills' defense and Rivers isn't playing, you should probably go and do that.
Yeah, despite the Bills getting shredded by the Saints last weekend, 41 points. But yeah, this is a matchup thing. Good bounce back opportunity for the Bills.
And last but not least, a guy that we know in New England, Danny Woodhead. He's eligible to return from IR this week. He's been on the IR with a torn hamstring since he suffered that injury back in Week 1. So someone to keep in mind as potentially returning. I don't know. With the playoffs looming, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think depending how big your league is, I think he's worthy of a roster spot. But want to talk about an offense that's struggling, the Ravens have also looked pretty disastrous. They're one of the worst offenses in the league right now. Their running backs haven't really, Alex Collins had one good week. Other than that, hasn't really been too pretty. So I would keep him on your roster. Wait for a game, maybe if he comes back and plays well, then you can pop him in there. But I wouldn't, be starting him in whenever he makes his debut.
Well, not only do we have some injuries to deal with, but we're also in the final bye week of the NFL regular season. We have 4 teams on byes this week: the Carolina Panthers, the Indianapolis Colts, the New York Jets, and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, the good thing is that 3 out of those teams have 4 wins or less. So they're not exactly the biggest offensive producers. But at the same time, we are going to miss a few key names. Quarterbacks, not the case there. Cam Newton, Josh McCown, so Jacoby Brissett. So basically Newton.
Yeah, Cam Newton's the only one to worry about. Brissett also in the concussion protocol, so he probably would have been out anyways. But yeah, Newton's the big one. Running
backs: Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Stewart, and Carlos Hyde. So those are some pretty big names.
Yeah, I mean, Hyde's been relatively productive. McCaffrey's actually been a guy who's come
solid.
Along. I actually own him in one of my other leagues, and he's 3 touchdowns his last 2 games. He's been really good, so he'll be kind of a flex guy to replace.
Wide receivers, T.Y. Hilton. You have Hilton as well, right? I believe, yes.
He was a bust this week, so he deserves to be take a week off.
Okay. Funchess and Robbie Anderson.
So. Yeah, again, not too much.
Yeah.
We didn't even list the 49ers receivers. You could say Marquise Goodwin, he did have that touchdown the other day.
And what an incredible story. This is a guy who lost his newborn daughter, I believe it was a daughter, 4 hours before the game.
Yeah.
Then he goes in there and he scores his first touchdown of the season.
Yeah.
And if you watch his emotional celebration, I guess you could call it, after the touchdown, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, and I guess in that sense, it's probably, it's good that he has a bye. He, can go spend time with his family and get away from football for a little bit.
How are you strong enough to play in that game?
It's crazy.
I have no idea. Kudos to you. I mean, that was incredible to see. Week 11 waiver wire. So not too many guys that we need to replace, as you mentioned, but who are some quarterbacks that you're looking at?
Yeah, I think, like I mentioned, Keenum, I think, is a worthy option, even against the Rams. It's a tough matchup. He's kind of the hot hand. I also like our old friend Jay Cutler, even though, if anyone watched that game the other night against the Panthers, he threw a pretty brutal pick, but he put up
Jay Cutler?
Yeah, I know, right? But fortunately, brutal picks count the same as normal picks in fantasy football, and touchdowns count as a lot. And the... let's see. Yeah, they're playing the Dolphins are playing the Bucs next week, and the Bucs actually. We'll get to this in my bold prediction from last week. I was a little bit wrong about the Bucs, how bad the Bucs secondary is. They had a little bit of a strong showing against the Jets, but they're still not in great shape. So I think Cutler's kind of a sneaky play if you need him.
Good to know. Wide receivers.
Yep, wide receivers. I like Dontrell Inman. Joined the Bears the other week or this past week. 6 catches for 88 yards in his Bears debut. I think the Bears are kind of letting Mitch Trubisky throw a little bit, air it out, see what he's got. So they're playing the Lions, another divisional matchup, and they rank 23rd against the pass this season. So I think he's a solid option. Moving
on to running backs, and granted, we know that pickings are pretty slim at this point. So
yeah. So I mean, like you said, that's a little tricky. If you want to dig deep, Jamal Williams, the rookie running back for the Packers. I know we mentioned the Packers running back situation hasn't been great, but Brett Hundley's not throwing the ball a ton of times per game, so he could get some touches. They're playing the Ravens, who have allowed 6 rushing touchdowns in the last 7 games, so maybe an option there. Also, maybe Rex Burkhead, which we can discuss in our Patriots segment, but he could be a guy worth taking an eye on.
And last but not least, tight ends.
Yep. Tight ends, also very slim pickings this week. So we're diving down to Jermaine Gresham. Not exactly. Not a whole lot of catches, but touchdowns back-to-back weeks. For the Cardinals, Texans are coming in. They've allowed the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Obviously, Drew Stanton might not even play for them, so I think they're on their 3rd-string quarterback. But if you need a tight end, he's not the worst option.
Okay, Patriots fantasy check-in. All is well in New England right now.
Certainly
Everyone's
is.
happy here. Lots of smiles around the office because the Pats absolutely destroyed the Broncos on Sunday night, 41-16. Pretty big day for a lot of Patriots players. Brady passed for 3 touchdowns. Great day for Patriots running backs.
Yes.
Lewis, Burkhead, and White all scored at least 1 touchdown. Deion Lewis had the best game of the year so far for him. He had 55 yards and a touchdown, and he added a kick return touchdown. That was pretty fun to watch. 103 yards, I believe.
And 103 yards, a nice assist from the Broncos special teams. Gave him a nice shove in the back, and he just kept on running. That was terrific.
Good on him.
Yep.
Brandon Cooks, Rob Gronkowski, 74 yards each, so kind of for them.
Yeah. I mean, for 74 yards isn't bad, but if you're talking about Gronk's the guy, and especially no touchdowns either. And same thing with Cooks. Cooks has kind of been solid, but he didn't have his huge play or a touchdown. So the spotlight was more on the running backs in this one.
Exactly. Mike Gillislee, let's talk about this guy because he started off the year very strong. If you had him for the first game of the season, you were incredibly happy because he scored 3 touchdowns in that one, or 2? 3. 3 touchdowns in that one, and then he added a touchdown in his 2nd game, and since then, he was inactive against the Broncos, which means Rex Burkhead is a guy who's kind of filling that role in the production. His production has steadily been increasing over the past 3 games, and this is a guy that you mentioned as someone we should target off the waiver wires.
Yeah, I mean, going back to Gillislee, this is why you just can't trust Patriots running backs, especially in the draft. If you're trying to, in your fantasy draft, a lot of people took Gillislee pretty high, and now he's inactive. for, I mean, maybe he did well in the beginning of your season, but yeah, I think Burkhead is a guy who's kind of coming into his own a little bit. If they're really going to make Gillislee inactive going forward, then it's kind of Lewis and Burkhead in the run game, and Burkhead also factors into the pass game as well, along with James White. I think his ceiling, like all of the Patriots running backs, is pretty low. It's not going to be, he's not going to have a 100-yard rushing game, or he's not going to usually catch 10 passes or anything like that. But he has a nice balance of both. So I think he's a pretty good bet a lot of times for maybe 10 fantasy points, combination of rushing and passing. So I think he's worth the pickup, just considering who the running back options are at this point. It's always, this late in the season, you need to find a good running back. They're hard to come by. Pretty solid matchup against the Raiders. The Raiders defense isn't really anything special, so I think at the very least he's worth getting on your roster and going from there and seeing rolling the dice with Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels to see what they're going to do.
You mentioned that Raiders game. The Patriots play the Raiders in Mexico City on Sunday. Should be a fun one to watch.
Yes.
If anything,
altitude.
just for the atmosphere, right? Who do you like in that game?
Yeah, I think it could be a high-scoring affair. I think the Patriots offense is kind of firing on all cylinders right now. And the Raiders offense, I think, will give the Patriots defense a test a lot more than the Brock Osweiler show did in last week. So, Derek Carr, I think, is a viable fantasy option. The Raiders wide receivers, kind of a tricky situation. You have Michael Crabtree has been the more consistent guy, but Amari Cooper has kind of had a real roller coaster of a season, but he can, he has a propensity for those huge games. Propensity? Yes, that is the word. Are you
studying for the SATs right now?
That's the word of the day on Fantasy Picks, propensity.
I'm going to go look up what that means as soon as we get done here.
So yeah, I would, if you're feeling bold, I think Cooper and Crabtree are worthy of starts. Obviously, the Patriots secondary has been a lot better than they have. But if you looked at last week, still, Emmanuel Sanders had over 100 receiving yards. They still allow a lot of yards in between the red zones, and then once you get to the red zone, then they kind of stiffen up a little bit. But I think Raiders wide receivers are still good plays. Marshawn Lynch, I'd say probably a fair bet to, maybe he gets in the end zone once. Maybe he breaks off a beast mode run. Who knows?
Well, we know he doesn't like the Patriots too much. So.
That's true.
Could be going at him. Okay, well, before we get to watch that game, we have Thursday Night Football coming up. The Titans, who are 6-3, take on the Steelers, 7-2. Both of these teams are first in their respective divisions, so it should be a fun one to watch, we hope. Yep. Who do you like on the Titans?
This is kind of a tricky game. We were just kind of talking about this. The Steelers have kind of transformed into a great defensive team. They have not a lot of not a lot of offense, not very high scoring, but their defense has been great. So I think I probably wouldn't start Marcus Mariota. The Steelers are allowing 182 passing yards per game, which is second best in the NFL. So I would probably avoid Mariota. I think you can probably get away with starting DeMarco Murray. He's gets a lot of touches. I think he'll probably see the majority of touches over Derrick Henry. If you go to the Steelers on the other side, obviously the main guys, Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell. I think they're going to be workhorses. They're still going to get their touches. Juju Smith-Schuster, our favorite, great name to say. He's got the bike and all that.
And the touchdown dances.
And the touchdown dances. Yeah, great one last week. With,
phenomenal.
Choreographed choke out there.
Yes.
That was good stuff. So, if you're a fan of great celebrations, then you might as well start him in your lineup, and then you can root for a touchdown.
Yes, of course. I love watching that guy. Best defenses this week. Yeah. Who are you looking at? Yeah,
so there's kind of a slam dunk play this week. The Jaguars are playing the Browns. So we have the best fantasy defense going up against one of the worst offenses. The Jaguars actually were a little bit underwhelming defensive-wise this past week, but it's the Browns.
We'll let it slide.
I think Deshaun Kaiser will happily be. He won't be happily sacked by the Jaguars, but your fantasy owners, if you own the Jags, you'll be happy about the sacks. So there'll be a lot of them.
Any other defenses you're looking at?
Yeah, I think the sneaky play of the week, I guess you could say. We'll have to get that, work on a sponsor for that one, sneaky play of the week. But the Texans, as we mentioned, the Cardinals offense not playing too well. Drew Stanton probably going to be out. They're going to be on their third string quarterback. Could be a lot of turnovers in this one. Pretty sloppy game. So I like the Texans playing at home against the Cardinals.
Now, we always ask you for your bold prediction at the end of this podcast. Last week, we had a revenge game going on between the Jets and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh McCown going against their former teams. So you predicted big games out of both of them, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Well, it was kind of a dud game.
Yes.
No one saw that coming.
Yeah.
I think everyone thought this was going to be a better game than it was. But like I said,
appreciate you having me back.
Dud week in the NFL. It's not your fault.
Yeah.
They're both okay, though.
Okay is probably
okay.
Generous. Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, had about 11 fantasy points.
I would have gladly taken that over Tyrod Taylor this week.
That's true. Maybe it's a matter of perspective.
Exactly. I think he got me 4 points.
I had Jared Goff and you had Taylor, so our expectations are a little different.
Your expectations are very high after that. So this week, bold prediction.
Yep, we're looking for a bounce back weekend for the bold prediction. I'm going to go with Dez Bryant. So he's been up and down a little bit, but I'm looking at that Cowboys-Eagles game and the Eagles' success against the run and the Cowboys' failure to run the ball last week. So hey, you might as well air it out. Throw the ball a lot, and Dez Bryant is Dak Prescott's #1 target. So maybe there's, he gets a lot of targets, and he's the guy he looks to in the red zone. So I'm predicting 2 touchdowns for Dez Bryant.
You were going to say 2 touchdowns? You could have just gone with 1.
I know.
This is a guy who's had a very quiet year.
I'm burying myself, but hey, gotta go big. 2 touchdowns from Dez Bryant. Double or nothing.
I hope we see it. Okay. He was kind of dealing with an ankle injury last week, right? So this week he should be a lot better.
He's going to magically heal and catch 2 touchdowns.
He looked into the crystal ball, and 2 touchdowns for Dez Bryant. You heard it here first. Okay, that will do it. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck this week. Try not to get on any of those buses that are going
10 hours
hours in one direction. And
stick with pizza.
Our very own Doug Hyde, he will be in Mexico City for the Patriots game. So as always, make sure you keep it on NESN.com for all your NFL and Patriots news.